Folks, it's me, Denny Carter. Welcome to yet another episode of the Dad Season Show. This one is called episode 11. It is our 11th, so that actually does check out. Thank you for joining me today. If you're here for the live stream, the live chat on YouTube, I'm also streaming on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. So if you're catching me there, maybe do me a solid and just click over to YouTube and give me a little like and maybe a little subscription. You get crazy, you come for the like, button, and you hit the subscribe too. It goes hand in hand, really. When you think about it, how can you do one without the other? You both like and subscribe. It just goes together. It's like peanut butter and jelly. If peanut butter and jelly were not bad. That's how I would that would be my comp. By the way, I'm huge into chunky peanut butter right now. Huge phase. Folks who follow me on various microblogging platforms, including the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, will know that I was big into hummus last year. I mean, huge. Every day I had a little hummus time, and I would announce it. I would announce it on the internet. It's hummus time, and I would eat an ungodly amount of hummus. I'm done with hummus. It kind of grosses me out now because I eat too much. You know when you're a kid and you eat too much of one thing, one treat, snack, whatever, and you get sick of it. I did that with animal crackers. Does anyone remember animal crackers? Only 80s kids are gonna remember this, folks. Only the 80s kids know about animal crackers. But folks, I ate around 1 billion animal crackers from like 1990 to 1992. And then I never had one again. I still have not had one since 92. March 3rd, 1992 was the last time I ate an animal cracker. I have that in my diary. Anyway, I did that with hummus. Okay. I exhausted that phase. And now we're on to chunky peanut butter. Like huge chunks of peanut butter. And people say, well, why don't you simply eat peanuts? And I would say I also do that. I also eat peanuts. So, but I like the peanuts mixed in with the peanut butter. Is that really so hard to understand? Anyway, like and subscribe. If you want to support the Dad Season Show, if you're enjoying it, if you're taking something away from it, consider becoming a patron. I'm going to throw the Patreon link in the live chat for folks who want to jump in there. We have a growing number of patrons, which I really do appreciate. And let's see, I'm throwing it in the chat if you guys want to. And I'm not going to push the Patreon forever, but I would like to get it going a little bit until I get some ad revenue from this little show here. This little show that could. So until then, I'm going to bother you about becoming a patron and supporting the Dad Season Show because it is Dad Season. Before we get into today's main topic, the meat of the show, as some are calling it, I prefer to call it the heart of the show. But folks are constantly asking me to talk about the meat of the show. So before we get to the show's meat, we're gonna talk, which by the way is helicopter parenting, and some of the research that's been done on that over the years, especially recent, like post 2020 helicopter parenting, which really the helicopter parenting really ramped up, folks, apparently. During COVID and then after COVID, and it makes sense in a lot of ways. I get that. So we're gonna look into that research and see what's what. So I went into this show, building a plan for the show, thinking that helicopter parenting is just bad. There's no upside. It's all downside. It's like Jaden Daniels. Sorry. But but it turns out there's actually Upside. I I don't look. I take zero pleasure in reporting that it might actually be good to helicopter parent, according to some research. Um, but I will present that because I report and you decide. That I made that up for this show. That's something I made up. And if you can hear my daughter screaming for some reason in the background, that's because the kids don't have school today. No school on a Monday is pretty tough for your boy, Denny, me, because, oh boy, trying to get work done while also trying to entertain the kids is not always the easiest thing. But we persist. We will go on. I wanted to start today before we get into the meat of the show, which is helicopter parenting. I wanted to start today by talking about dad strength, which is a phenomenon I think everybody is familiar with to some degree. My experience with dad strength goes like this. My dad, when I was growing up, never worked out a day in his life. I mean, he played tennis, he played a little golf. He'd throw the ball around. He coached my teams, so he was into sports. But he he wasn't going to the gym and pumping iron. Okay, he wasn't working on his lats at the gym at all. In fact, he probably didn't even know what lats were. And like baby boomers until recently, until they all lost their minds with fitness crazes, didn't do the gym. They just didn't. And they didn't drink water. They didn't sleep. They didn't go to the gym. They didn't do any of that. And they're fine. Okay. And they're fine. So I think actually millennials can maybe take a page from that book. Just maybe not all the pages, just one page maybe from that book and say, hey, my mom and dad are okay. And they never had a sip of water in their whole life. And that's all I do. All I do all day is drink water. And I'm fretting. I have constant anxiety about whether I'm drinking enough water. Because every time I log on to any social media platform, I'm bombarded with ads saying you're not drinking enough water. And because you're not, you need our product. Okay? So baby boomers as a generation never had one sip of water. They're fine. They're the most well-off generation in the history of mankind. And it might be because they didn't have any water. So anyway, my dad never worked out, never drank water, whatever. And he was incredibly strong. He could seemingly lift anything at any time. He could push anything. We had a little boat back in the day, and it got stuck one time. And me and my brother, I was like 16, my brother was like 12. We jumped out and tried to push the boat out of the mud, the muck, okay, of the Chesapeake Bay. And I was a fit 16-year-old. And if you don't believe, I'll find some pictures, folks. I was fit. Let's just say that. I mean, I wasn't like Hollywood ripped, but I was kind of ripped. So it's not like I was a weakling. And my brother was a big, sturdy guy. And we got in there and we pushed and we couldn't move that boat 1 inch. My dad gets in, literally tells us to step aside. Okay. Like basically like, I don't even need you. And easily extracts the boat from the muck with like one push, like one big push. And it's gone. And my brother and I were trying for 5 minutes. We were exhausted, panting, sweating in the summer heat. My dad gets in, he just does it. That's dad's strength. That's dad's strength. You can, with dad's strength, you can open anything. Hard to open toys. The dad hands, they grab it and they rip. And there's no explanation for it. Like, again, my dad wasn't training to be strong. He just was strong. And still is, for an old guy, he's still pretty strong. I don't have that strength. And I know, many of you, maybe the haters will say, of course you don't. You're weak. You're a beta. All these things, all these insults that I get every day. Of course you don't have that strength. But here's the thing. I don't think Me being a beta has nothing to do with it, is what I would say. Me being a white collar worker has everything to do with it. Because the only thing I work out while I'm actually working, doing my work, is my fingies. My little fingies, because I'm typing. And I said, oh, my fingers are tired. My wrists are so tired. My eyes are tired looking at the screen. My back kind of hurts from sitting down. That's what I do for work every day of my life. And that's what I probably will do for work every day of my life until, eternity, and or I'm dead. I'm thinking it's the latter. My dad was a blue collar worker from 17 years old. Okay. Everything was manual. And I'm talking like grinding manual labor. And so I think that's the difference. I think it's that dad's strength is actually blue collar strength. It's not someone on YouTube suggested this theory, and it really captured me in my imagination, because I think that's right. Because I know you see on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, people will make fun of people with, quote, email jobs. Okay, this is like a way to shame people who work from home or don't, are not like working an oil rig 18 hours a day and drinking whiskey the other 6 hours a day, something like that. Okay, like you're not doing like the romantic oil rig thing. That video that circulates every once in a while of the two guys. I think they're working an oil rig. Who's to say? Only oil rig I've ever seen is on There Will Be Blood. Okay, and that looked dangerous. I don't want to do that. People dying, falling in the hole, breaking their legs, heavy equipment falling on them. I'd rather have an email job. I'd rather use my fingies to type and be done with it and get a little paycheck, and that's it. That sounds better than dying in an oil rig accident. But you have people online, they're shaming us email workers. We love our email jobs, don't we, folks? We're bringing back the email jobs. What am I getting to here? Yes, but the email jobs are not going to make you dad strong. Not going to give you dad strength. Okay, so if you want dad strength, whether you're a mom or a dad or don't have kids, I think you got to shift to blue collar work. I think that's the only option. I don't really see anything, any way around that part of the equation. So just consider that. And by the way, the dad strength translates. It should really look. I don't want to get canceled. I'm going to call it parent strength, because when I was a kid, my mom not working out, not doing anything like that. But when she needed to do something, when a shelf would fall down, like in the basement or in the playroom or something, right? And she needed to lift it up, she would do it. She would do it in one fell swoop, no problem. She would just lift up this huge, heavy thing, and I would be like, "Wait, what? You're strong? You have like actual like strength?" That freaks me out. So it can translate mom strength, dad strength. And my mom was a blue collar worker as well. She was a waitress for years and years and years before she had kids. So dad's strength is not transferable, I don't think, to most millennials, because we are sitting behind our computers doing our email jobs all day. Unfortunately, we will never get to experience dad's strength. Although there are certain times where, just by default, I guess I'm stronger than my kids, and they'll ask me to open something and I will do it. And they'll say, "Whoa, I've been trying to open that jar of pickles for 5 minutes and you just did it." I'm like, "Yeah, that's right. That's right. I have an email job and I can still open a jar of pickles, folks. It's no problem. It's no problem. You got another jar? There's more where that came from, is what I say." All right. On to your comments, and then we'll get to the show's meat. Neil Dutton. Hi, Neil. He says, "I will, quote, subscribe, but I'll never like anything." Come on, Neil. Like the video. Sal Nichols in the chat says, "My parents were so laissez-faire, I could have had a job and a wife." Yeah. Neil back in the chat. You all need to invest in my say no to water and working out, say yes to becoming Mr. Universe fitness plan. It's that easy. I think that's what Neil is saying. Matthew in the chat says the number of fantasy teams this year named romantic oil rig thing is going to be off the charts. I think Matthew's right. You know, I get the romanticism of like hard blue collar work, you know, that like wears on your body and like makes you chiseled, and maybe like, you know, you're in the sun, so it makes your face like leathery and kind of pockmarked and things, right? You know, you look like you've lived. You look like you've been through things. You look like you've seen things. No one who does an email job has looks like they've seen anything. You know, they're pasty pale. They're just soft. You know, it happens. It happens. And this is why a lot of us, including myself, we torment ourselves by forcing ourselves to run or get on the treadmill or get on the bike or do some dang push-ups once in a while. Okay? And so that we can counter this email job situation. All right, folks, we're going to get to the heart / the meat of the show here. Welcome again to Dad Season episode 11. Thank you for joining the live chat. You can find this show on iTunes and what's the other one? Spotify. Yes. And I would also love if you could subscribe on YouTube. That would help me a lot to get to the point of monetization, which is key. All right. So helicopter parenting, in my research, helicopter parenting mostly revolved, or the research at least, mostly revolved around academics and parents' obsession with, you know, keeping tabs on their kids' academics, making sure they get into good schools, doing things in that service, right? And to, like basically everything that parents do today, at least the middle class parents do today, is in service of their kids' college prospects, which makes me nervous because I've never done any of that. So maybe I'm falling behind. Maybe I should look strongly into college for my kids, because I haven't thought about that for 1 second. Anyway, the research can be split into two things. It can be split into academics and then like social helicopter parenting, where you're constantly concerned about your kids' well-being and their socialization, right? I'll start with the academics because I found something interesting. There was research done 2 years ago that led to a New York Times piece with the headline, and I can link to this on the Patreon page with a GIF link from New York Times. The headline was, "The bad news about helicopter parenting, it works." This immediately triggered me, by the way, when I read this. But here's a little bit from that article. Researchers analyzed the 2012 PISA, PISA, an academic test of 15-year-olds around the world, along with reports from the teenagers and their parents about how they interact. They found that an intensive parenting style, helicopter parenting, in other words, correlated with higher scores on the test. This was true even among teenagers whose parents had similar levels of education. That, you know, that's not good for those of us who want to dismiss helicopter parenting as excessive and unnecessary, because that seems like it's actually working. But the reason it's working is pretty bleak. And like a lot of the things, honestly, look, I promise you, I'm not getting political here, but a lot of the things that we talk about on the Dad Season show are closely linked to economics and therefore closely linked to changes in capitalism over the generations. Capitalism today is way different than it was when our parents were growing up. And certainly when our grandparents were growing up, very, very different. You can look into that on yourself. But the authors of this study that was written about in the New York Times a couple years ago, The authors explain that when inequality hit a low in the 1970s, this is in the US, there wasn't that much of a gap between what someone earned with or without a college degree. Strict parenting gave way to an era of, quote, permissive parenting, giving children lots of freedom with little oversight. This was, remember, in the 70s, particularly in the late 70s and early 80s. Why spend 18 years nagging kids to succeed if the rewards were not worth it? In the 1980s, however, inequality increased sharply in Western countries, especially in the United States, and the gap between white and blue collar pay widened. Permissive parenting was replaced by helicopter parenting. Middle and upper class parents who'd gone to public schools and spent evenings playing kickball in the neighborhood began elbowing their toddlers into fast track preschools and spending evenings monitoring their homework and chauffeuring them to activities. Yeah, that checks out. It checks out. Everyone I know has their kids enrolled in 55 activities, and we have them enrolled in activities as well. My kids. That wasn't really the case for everyone. Of course, I mean, I had friends who play like travel baseball, travel basketball teams, and that was intensive and very involved. So that makes sense, but it wasn't as pervasive. And there was more going outside and just finding someone to play with, but no one's outside anymore. And it's not necessarily because they're cooped up, addicted to screens, attached to screens 24 hours a day. That's not necessarily, the research bears that out. It's not necessarily the reason. It doesn't help. But the main reason is because the main reason kids are not outside is because they are too busy. They're too busy. They have classes and sporting things to go to, and academic, academic boosting courses and other things to get to. So it's changed. It's changed the way that parents approach their kids' free time. Basically, as millennials, I think we have learned probably the hard way that optimizing your children's free time is the best way to give them an advantage, an economic advantage, as they grow up into into adolescence, and then into adulthood. And that's, to me, then that's pretty bleak. That's kind of depressing. That a child's free time needs to be used to optimize, because everything in modern culture is about optimization. It goes back to the obsessive drinking of water, right? You're optimizing your body, right? You're optimizing your sleep, you're optimizing everything, and you can attach various pieces of technology to your body to help you optimize, and that technology can tell you exactly how to live. And that's the future. It is the future. I'm sure I'll give into it one day. We will have zero free will. We will be completely controlled by the various gadgets on and in our bodies, telling us what to do and when to do it. There's no escaping that future unless you want to go live in the woods by yourself. And so this translates to the way we treat our kids' free time, not as an opportunity to blow off steam and to have fun and to get some exercise, but to make sure that the college resume looks that much better, to give them that much more edge over the competition to get into college and to get a good degree and to get a good job, and eventually make a lot of money, make a lot more money than they would have otherwise. And so I'm not disparaging this as something that doesn't work. As the New York Times piece said very clearly, this actually, intensive parenting or helicopter parenting, works really well if the goal is to maximize your child's economic prospects. And as cold and unfeeling as that sounds, it makes, it is what we want, right? As parents, it is we want our kids to have as good or better lives than we had. Obviously, I think we've passed the threshold of of promising our kids better lives than we had. Every generation for many generations has been the goal and often has been achieved largely. I think that we are now at the point, and there's research statistics to back this up. We're at the point where that has leveled off or even dropped. But yeah, I mean, if you can do something to give your kids an advantage, you want to do it. I want to do it. I'm not, so I'm not dismissing any of this. Okay. I do want to say that the New York Times piece and the about that research into helicopter parenting, it mentions something that the Dad Season show has harped on since day one, which is authoritarian parenting versus authoritative parenting and how that relates to helicopter parenting, right? So here's what it said. Using data from a national study that followed thousands of American teenagers for years, the authors found that the offspring of authoritative parents were more likely to graduate from college and graduate school, especially compared with those with authoritarian parents. This was true even when they controlled for the parents' education and income. In other words, we have another reason to commit to the authoritative parenting style. And if you want to know more about this, you can look back at episode 2 or 3 of the Dad Season show. We talk about that a lot. Authoritative is setting boundaries, committing to those boundaries, telling your kids why you're doing what you're doing, instead of the authoritarian approach, which is the approach, simply put, it's do what I say because I said it, and I'm not going to explain further. A lot of us grew up with that. Okay, many people in their 30s and 40s grew up with that authoritarian style, and at least I thought that was the only way to go. Maybe you did too. But I'm telling you, as someone who is now somewhat experienced with authoritative parenting, it takes more effort, but the payoff is tremendous, both in the short term and especially in the long term. You can have a much better relationship with your kids. Any type of kid, honestly. Confrontational, meek, whatever your kid's style is. Authoritative parenting is the way to go, and that is reflected in this research on helicopter parenting, where the helicopter parents who employ authoritarian style parenting see much worse results. Again, and this is controlled for income, and this is controlled for the education level of the parents. So you can't just dismiss this as saying, "Oh, well, of course," because we're talking about people with a lot of money versus and a lot of resources versus people without any resources or money. So just remember that, okay? And folks, I would encourage you to go look back at that authoritative versus authoritarian episode of Dad Season show. But yeah, so this research suggests that I was wrong in going into this topic thinking that there were only negatives. The state of capitalism, the nature of capitalism, has created a deeply unequal society in which we need to compete with each other more fiercely than ever before. And parents know this inherently, especially those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And so helicopter parenting in that way does work. I hate to say it. Let's go to your comments, and then we're going to get into the other side of the coin. Okay, we're still in the meat of the show, by the way, but we're going to talk in just a moment about the downside, especially of socialization purposes of helicopter parenting. Tony Reimer is in the chat. Hey, Tony. He says, my biggest regret so far parenting my kids is I wish I helicoptered them less. There's still time. They're 17 and 14. But I wish I let them try their strength more. I let them fail more. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard to let a kid fail, especially when you can see it coming, right? Like whatever they're doing, playing a game, you know, if they fail something in school, if they fail in a relationship, and you can see it happening in real time, and you desperately want to stop that because we talked about this last week as well. You want to stop them from feeling hard feelings. You want to do anything to help them avoid experiencing, embarrassment, fear, disappointment, and you want to be a human shield for that. No, 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 my kids can't experience this. I can't let them fail. I can see it coming. How it's on me. It's incumbent on me to stop this from happening. I've been there. I've been there, Tony, many times, many times. And I will say, and I said this on the Dad Season Show Patreon page, I believe. Some of this is based, if not all of it's based in selfishness. Because as parents, we don't really want to deal with that, right? We don't want to deal with the fallout of our kids failing, because that requires, maybe a reaction, a big reaction, right? That requires intervention, like lots of it, talking, maybe a fight that develops between you and the kid, maybe an argument, conflict, right? Like, that you're going to have to deal with the fallout. So that's why that's kind of why you want to be that human shield. Say, no, you can't, don't, please, kid, don't experience this failure because I can't deal with it. I can't. I do that, man. It's a weakness of mine because I don't like conflict. And I find myself doing literally anything to avoid it. And sometimes you just can't. You just can't. So thank you for that, Tony. That actually resonated a lot. As you can see, Sal Nichols back in the chat. Sal says, when I was in grade 3, they told us we would be the first generation to not do better than our parents, and it traumatized me. Yeah, look, it's true though, and I know that's not something you typically want to say to a kid, but that absolutely is the case. That reminds me of my principal in elementary school. When I was in 6th grade, elementary school used to go up to 6th grade back 300 years ago when I was in elementary school, and I was in 6th grade, and my principal pulled us all aside one day, and he said, "Look, I see you guys playing a lot of basketball out there, playing a lot of football. I know you play on teams outside the school. I just want you to know that none of you will be professional athletes. Not even close." All right. Thanks, Mr. Well, yeah, I mean, come on. I'll just say it. Mr. Schnackenberg. Mr. Schnackenberg, he was a realist. Folks. And he said, "Look, this ain't happening. You think you're going to be an NBA player? You're not." And I said, "Hey, look, if Jeff Hornacek can be an NBA player, I can be. If John Stockton can be an NBA player, then I could be that too. I'm taller than Muggsy Bogues already. So, who's laughing now? I can easily be in the NBA." What I didn't know is that how much dog you had to have in you. And I had my dog levels were at 0. But yeah, he told us that. Funny enough, one of the kids in the class before me, his name was Roger Mason. He was an NBA player for, I think, 10 or 12 years. He played for the Washington Wizards, the Knicks, a few other NBA teams. So I don't know if my principal gave that speech to the class ahead of me, but if he did, he was dead wrong. Roger Mason made it to the NBA. Neil Dutton says, "Principal dream crusher from the top rope." That it was a dream crusher. I mean, all of us wanted to be pros in something, right? All of us. I for a while I was like, oh, I could definitely be a football player. No. I tried tackle football for 1 year and did not like it. Didn't like it. It wasn't in a dome, so I didn't like it. Tony Reimer's back in the chat. He said, "I've seen your mid-range game. Not going to cut it in the league." Yeah, no, so in basketball in school, I just camped out at the 3-point line, and I was like, "Here, guys, hey, I'm going to be right here on the wing if you need me." In no way am I ever going to crash the board for a rebound. I will never box someone out. I will never play defense. I just want to be honest with you. I'm here to shoot 3-pointers. I'm going to be on the wing. If you want to whip it out here once in a while, I'm going to shoot it, and I'm not going to try to. I'm going to shoot it, and I'm going to walk back to the other side of the court. That'll be my role in this, and I regret that. I can't even tell you guys how much I regret that. If I could go back to high school basketball, I played 2 years high school basketball, and talk to myself. Okay, talk to 15 to 16-year-old Denny, and I could say, and I could give some advice. I would say, get crazy, man. Just lose your mind out there. Like go full Dennis Rodman, okay? You're never, like, again, like Mr. Schnackenberg said, you're never going to be a pro. You're never going to be good. So just get wild. Like pride yourself on your ability to get rebounds. Even if you're not scoring a bunch, even if you're not, rebounding and putting back up and score, get rebounds for your team. Get it to the good players. Like, keep things going. Be a dog on defense, right? Draw the charge. Stop being such a prima donna. You're not good enough for that. Just be a dog. God, I wish I could. Man. Regrets. Brett Mason is in the chat. Brett says, the key to navigate your kid around known pitfalls through experience. Helicopter parenting is now the norm. Lawnmower parents are the absolute worst. I don't know what a lawnmower parent is, Brett. If you could maybe educate me there briefly in the comments. Brett also says, I'd consider myself a drone parent in most aspects. Okay. Drone parent. I don't know. Brett's throwing terms at me I've never heard of. I needed Brett to help me prep for this dang episode. Wow, Brett, that's good stuff. All right, we're gonna get to the other side of helicopter parenting, which is the downside. Here's what some research has shown since 2020. This is from two child psychology researchers who work at California State University, Fresno, whatever that is. I'm kidding. I like to take shots at the West Coast. All right, they say this. While parental involvement might be the extra boost that students need to build their own confidence and abilities, overparenting appears to do the converse in creating a sense that one cannot accomplish things socially or in general on one's own. In other words, it breeds helplessness. The study showed that those college students with helicopter parents had a hard time believing in their own ability to accomplish goals. They were more dependent on others, had poor coping strategies, and didn't have soft skills like responsibility and conscientiousness throughout college. This is what the authors found. Helicopter parents are actually diminishing their child's ability to understand how to navigate the world by trying to do it for them. I found some anecdotes about helicopter parenting, and maybe if any educators are part of the dad season community, you want to chime in here. I didn't know the extent to which helicopter parenting could go. You have anecdotes about parents literally doing their kids' homework in college. Like, the kid comes home from a day at school, at college, again, I can't emphasize this enough, at a university, gives their homework to a parent, and the parent does it for them. And then the anecdote follows that when the child is asked to do something on their own, like a pop quiz or something in class, they have a panic attack. And this is not my exaggeration. Okay. These are not my words. Like, this is how the anecdote went. The student who had her parents do her mom, more specifically, do her homework for her, then had a panic attack when she had to do things in class by herself. And that makes sense. That makes sense. These kids, a kid like that has no confidence in herself to be able to do what needs to be done academically because she hasn't been asked to. She's been carefully guided through education, probably from a very young age, by a parent who cares very much about her child's future. But it's not good. That is a bad outcome, folks. If your kid is having like extreme anxiety about having to do schoolwork on their own, that's not what we're going for, right? So that's the downside of helicopter parenting. I it feels almost like for those of us who are not helicopter parenting in the academic space, it almost feels like we are like conceding or like yeah, like conceding ground to everybody else. Like, okay, you give your kid an advantage. I'm not going to do it. Uh, and this level of competition is exhausting. At least I find it exhausting. It also means that as a parent, forget all the stuff we've talked about. We talked about on the Dad Season show, unicorn time. Okay, time to ourselves, like really carving out spaces for us to relax, to do what we want, to engage with something that isn't parenting. Forget about all that. That's all out the window if you're actually helicopter parenting. If you're actually committed to providing this huge advantage for your kid academically, you can't do both. You can't spend all that time making sure your kid has the best advantage to get through school and to get a good job and all this stuff, and have time for yourself. You got to choose. I think you have to choose at least one or the other. So yeah, there is obviously a downside. I would also say that the millennials, again, I'm considered a geriatric millennial. That's not a joke. People think I'm joking when I say that. It's an actual term. You can look it up. I think millennials never really had a chance to not be helicopter parents socially because we grew up in a media environment like basically like soaked with fear. Okay, I remember hearing about who's the America's Most Wanted guy, John Walsh. I remember being very young. I don't know, 6, 7 years old. I remember being very young and hearing about John Walsh's son being abducted and murdered. And this scared the shit out of me. I mean, like truly very scary stuff, right? And you would turn on the TV any night and see Cops, the show Cops, right? You would see other shows. I remember a movie of the week thing about an abusive father who goes on some sort of killing streak. That scarred me, man. That scarred me. And so you grow up with a media that's telling you that the world is uh, inherently dangerous, that you could be victimized by this random violence at any time. And then when you have kids, what are you going to do? You're going to deprogram yourself instantly and be like, oh yeah, no, everything that I've learned about society through the TV is wrong, and I'm going to operate accordingly. No, you're going to transfer that fear and those anxieties to your kid in the form of never letting your kid out of your sight. And I'm a little bit torn here because there have been times where I've let my kids out of my sight and I'm very uncomfortable with it. And if I can't immediately identify where they are when it's time to go find them, I freak out. Internally, I freak out. One time I had to ask a random lady if I could have her cell phone because my kid had my phone and he wasn't where he was supposed to be. And so I had to ask a lady for her phone and I had to call him and say, "Get your butt over here, mister." That was scary. I was sweating pretty hard there. But yeah, I don't think people in their 30s and 40s today, parents in their 30s and 40s, maybe even in their 50s, Gen X types. I don't think we ever really had a great chance of not wanting to be a helicopter over our kids at all times because we're scared, man. We're so scared. It's a frightening. There's murderers on every corner, right? And they're coming for you. And there's kidnappers and everything, right? I mean, look, there were a lot of things that were big in the 80s. Lava was huge in the 80s. Okay. What else? Lava. There was there's always a second thing. Lava and something else were huge in the 80s. Oh, quicksand huge in the 80s. Kidnapping huge in the 80s. I honestly thought every single person, every single stranger I saw in public growing up, I thought, oh, this kidnapper, obviously. But this was actually taught, at least at one point was taught, like stranger danger, like don't ever talk to a stranger because they'll do harm to you. And so we grew up as the most anxiety-ridden generation in history. And what, we were supposed to not be helicopter parents? We were supposed to not be what's called intensive, over-involved parents. Of course we were always going to be that way. But I do think that we have a chance to deprogram ourselves a little bit in that regard and read up on these topics. Okay, do your own research. Okay, not that kind. Again, I'm begging you, don't do that kind, but do this kind of research. And see, what are the upsides, what are the downsides of this over involved parenting. I found another New York Times piece on some Silicon Valley libertarian weirdo who has created a play area in his obviously huge yard where kids can come at any time, and it's like Lord of the Flies. Like kids can do anything they want without any adult intervention at all. I don't know about that, Silicon Valley weirdo. But I do think that there's a happy medium there to let kids figure it out by themselves. To not have to come in and govern every interaction with kids, because that I do find myself doing that a lot. Being like, okay, I'm the government here. Like I'm coming in and I'm telling you how to manage yourselves, how to manage this game, how to manage all of your interactions. And for them to not be able to take that on their own and to do that on their own, I think is stunting their growth. It's stunting their socializations. Shirley. Don't call me Shirley. Neil's back in the chat. He says that there's a show in the UK called Crime Watch that seeks the public's help in solving crimes, horrific, awful crimes. And it would end with one of the hosts saying, "Don't have nightmares. Too late, pal." That's what Neil Dutton says. Yeah, it is too late. When you do grow up in that environment, it affects you. It affects you on a level that you don't even realize sometimes. And I'm not saying bad things don't happen. I'm not denying that. But our sense of danger in the world is greatly, greatly exaggerated by movies, by TV shows that have told us for our whole lives. That's the one thing we all have in common. We've watched TV our entire lives. And through that TV, we have learned things about life. And one of them is that everybody is out to get you. I think we can kind of push back on that and counteract that so that it doesn't completely rule the way that we parent our children. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you for joining in the chat on YouTube or on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. I'll be streaming there every Monday at 1 o'clock. I hope you can join me sometimes. I hope you can like and or subscribe, hopefully both, on YouTube, and consider supporting Dad Season Show via Patreon. I'll see you next week. Until then, it remains Dad Season.